Welcome to the Sheridan Report, brought to you by MyBookie.Ag. Make sure you go to thegruellytruth.com, click on the MyBookie.Ag banner at the top of the page for up to a $1,000 cash bonus on your first deposit. I am your co-host for the Sheridan Report, Mike Goodpaster, and right now I want to welcome in from the Sheridan Report, Bobby Sheridan. How you doing, Bobby?
Hey, Mike, I'm doing great. It's Saturday morning, and, you know, I woke up. I got to tell a quick story. I woke up this morning to an ATP Early Risers Fabio Fognini win. He goes off at plus 810 to beat the great Nadal on clay. And I'm going to tell you how I wound up with that, okay, Mike? I'm going to tell you how I wound up on that. And this is straight from our Maple Leafs thought process yesterday. And that is when you have a take on something, you follow, and then when that thing's ready, you pounce on it. And if you're right, you get rewarded. And let me explain what happened. I was talking to a tennis media lady on Twitter. I follow her, and she's really good. And her Twitter handle, it's called @LuciaHoff, maybe. But tennis media is the title of her thing. And I really respect her. We're talking, and I said, you know, Nadal, he pulled out of an earlier tournament, and he lost in the finals terribly earlier before that, so earlier in the season. So, you know, he's not a lock anymore. There's some physical issues, and he's not the same level of eliteness. And I was telling her, I said, I thought that he could definitely lose this tournament. See, we're on clay now, and this is a prelude to the French Open. You know, and I said he's not a lock. I mean, there's no question he's not a lock. And I'm seeing it from a betting perspective, and just from a perspective of, you know, you're going to get great value. And so you just wait for the time. And so you see him win a couple matches where he's minus 2,000, minus 3,100, and you go, no, for sure, no. Then all of a sudden he plays Fognini today, who's a clay master himself, in the semis, and you see like a minus 950 on Nadal or something, plus 810. You go, okay, $100 on Fognini today gets you 800. Okay? If that thing loses, you're only into 100 into your take. And you just come back, you bet against him in the finals when you're plus like 500. Yeah, that's a couple hundred there. Don't have to bet the finals now, Mike, because you're not there anymore. Fognini wins at plus 810. That's what I woke up to this morning. So the point is to teach. Like the Leafs yesterday, we said if they win Game 3, they're going to win the series. Well, they came back and lost Game 4. All of a sudden, Game 5, they're a dog. Well, they got to win Game 5. They have to. That's 90%, the winner of Game 5, right? So you land on a 125 last night just by being right. And anyhow, that's a little lesson, you know, on how you can make money by having takes. How do you have takes? You follow, you watch, you're informed. And we start the day off that way.
All right, Bobby. What about Major League
Baseball?
Let's go to
baseball.
What's your takes there?
Yeah. Here we go, baseball, Mike. And you know, there's a game on coming up at 11:20, so we have 11 minutes, and we got in right at this time yesterday. We touted Diamondbacks at a great price, and that thing wound up losing 5-1. It was a really cold, bad day. I mean, the first two runs score on a pop up to center where the wind blows it 100 feet to the right, and you're down 2-0 before you know it, and it just it didn't go our way, but let's not stray. I think the Diamondbacks can compete with the Cubs very well in this series. And today they have a favorable pitching matchup. It's Zach Greinke at plus 119 over Yu Darvish at minus 129. And I don't have to sit and talk to you very long that betting against Yu Darvish is a good thing, because we know that Darvish is he hasn't been a quality pitcher for a couple of years now, and he's fought injuries, and he's trying to get himself back. And he does have a win on the year. He's 1-2 with a 6 ERA. But you're going against Zach Greinke, who, I tweeted this out last week. Anytime he takes the mound, anytime he takes the field, he's the best player on the field. And what I mean by that, he's a Gold Glover. His last game, he started 2 double plays, got 2 hits, scored 2 runs, went 7 innings, had 8 strikeouts, and gave up a run. I mean, the guy's the best player in the field. And anytime he starts, he has the capability of doing that. We talked about the Diamondbacks lineup and their ability to score runs with the Cubs great lineup. So I like the Diamondbacks as a dog. That's our first play of the day, and that's at 11:20. And if I can go over the other three straight bets I like, here they are. We got the Blue Jays today, and there's the Toronto theme. We've had them 2 days in a row. We're going for 3. They're going to be our free play for the 3rd day in a row. They've won the first 2. So the Blue Jays have been very good to us. They got a good feel on them. And the basic premise here is that Matt Shoemaker is pitching outstanding baseball. You know, we had him last time. We talked about that. We had him his last outing, and they got beat with him on the mound the last outing. But he still pitched through the ball really well. He's very familiar with Oakland A's, pitching at that stadium, coming from the Angels. He's been with the Angels the last 3 or 4 years, so he's many starts on that mound. And he's going against an Oakland team that, they're not firing on all cylinders. And they were lucky to win one of those games against the Astros. We had them that night. We were very lucky to win that game. And then they come back the next series, and they lose yesterday to Toronto. So we're going to stay on that. So we like the Blue Jays plus 137. We like the Orioles tonight. This is a late ad because there was no line on this yesterday, but I liked him in Game 2 over the Twins. That's with Alex Cobb as a home dog against Martin Perez. So I like the Orioles in Game 2, that is. And then the top play, Mike, is a team that we lost money on earlier in the year, and we're going to start making some of that money back, and we already have, because this is a team that's going to be heard from in the National League West, the Colorado Rockies. And this is a pitcher that's unsung, a kid named Antonio Senzatella. But if you looked at how he threw his last outing, he can definitely get it done today against the Phillies offense that, to me, is a bit sporadic on the road. And they're facing the great Aaron Nola, who he's not so great right now. I mean, if you go back and look nowadays, talk about changing landscapes. Don't just bet a name. Look at what's really happening. And he's not pitched well his first 3-4 outings of the year. So him being a favorite on the road is a bad play. The Rockies, an underdog at home, adding the 2 bats they added and now playing up to their potential is a great play. So the Colorado Rockies are a top play tonight.
All right, Bobby, what else we got? Anything else baseball-wise?
We do, because we got parlay action coming here, and that means for those that have been listening, these are going to be teams that are favored. And these are going to be, I think, the best value favorites, the favorites that I think you can mix and match with. And we've talked about what mixing and matching means, taking any piece of these, betting them all together, taking 2 of them and mixing it with a top play, getting value into another bet, maybe in the NBA. These are games you can make money on, even if you don't hit all 3. I usually put out 3 in a 3-teamer. Well, I've got 5 today because we have 2 late ads, and let me just go over them. I won't go over every, the details of every play, time, but it just winds up being one of those cards where there's just a lot of plays. So I think you can mix and match and put together in any format these following games. You got the Nationals at 3:00 with Scherzer on the mound. Okay, I think he should win that game at Miami. You've got scrolling down here. I'm not reading off of a deal. You got Tampa Bay Rays with Charlie Morton on the mound against the Red Sox against Rick Porcello. That's a huge advantage to Tampa Bay with Charlie Morton. And the third of those 5 would be the Angels tonight with Trevor Cahill. This is their best spot to beat Seattle. And they've lost 5 in a row to Seattle. And this is their best spot, this matchup, I believe. You got the Angels with Cahill on the mound. That's at 6:07. Okay, and you have a late ad, Cleveland in Game 2 over the Braves. That's Trevor Bauer's game, Game 2. You got the Cleveland, Trevor Bauer over the Braves. And then there's one I missed because I overlooked it, but I know it's Minnesota. There it is, Minnesota Game 1. That was on our 3-teamer yesterday that got rained out, and we're coming back with the same matchup. So that's Minnesota Game 1 at 105 with Berrios. So as you can see, there's 5 games there that are all favored, minus 150, minus 200, minus 160, things like that I think you can put together and play them all together and make a parlay value of like 5-1, or you can mix and match and throw them in with some of the basketball we're going to give you or some of your own takes or some of the top plays. That's how we play that.
All right, Bobby, you ready to go to the NBA?
I am, Mike, and the NBA has two games that very stick out to me. And if you follow my Twitter, I've gone over some of the latest results. We had the favorites yesterday go 1-2, so they came back to earth a little bit. Our underdog Magic barely covered. They lost by 5 and should have won that game. They did make more threes, which we predicted, but they took 25 more opportunities. They just made a few more. They only shot 29%. And, that was a winning game yesterday. It got away from them, but they still covered. They still covered the 5.5, and I'm happy for that. And they got a big shot in the next game, too. They have a chance to definitely take that back to Toronto even, but that's for another show. But today, and then I want to mention that the team that out-3'd their opponent was 2-1 yesterday, 3-0. Can't remember. I'm going over memory. 2-1 straight up, but 3-0 covering, because the Magic, they covered but didn't win. So that trend's going well. And then you had the Zigzag was 2-1 yesterday. So let's look at that today. The Zigzag theory puts you on the Nets. It would put you on Denver. It would put you on Detroit, and it would put you on the Jazz. So basically, where's where that would put you. But I'm going to tell you now my two picks. We're not following the Zigzag today. Here they are. We got the Philadelphia 76ers. I'm going to come right back with them. We had them as a play the other day, and I think they're going to come right back and beat the Nets. And this is a deal where Tobias Harris took over the game in the second half, and he really dominated and made clutch threes for them. Jimmy Butler's capable of doing that. Redick is capable of doing that. Embiid out of the lineup. Well, what do? They start this guy Monroe, but they come in with Marjanovic, so they got a two-headed monster there. That great production. And Ben Simmons is the best player on the court. The guy can't shoot, but he does everything else. 22 points, 12 rebounds, 10 assists, made his free throws. The Nets are really down to just throwing up the three ball and hoping they get lucky and make 18 of them or something. This is a mismatch. I think this series is over. And so I like the 76ers -2 today. For them not to win, they would have to play a really poor game. And I don't think that's what they're about right now. So I like the 76ers. And then we're going to hop down to the top play, Mike. And this is a team that we've touted now for months on air. They're playing their best basketball. They're proving it now, more even. And that's the Houston Rockets. And you're getting an opportunity here where you're getting the team that will represent the Western Conference in the championship. You're getting an opportunity to get points with them. And they're getting 2.5 at Utah. They beat them 2 times at Utah last year in the playoffs. So same situation. They were able to go down there last year and win. Utah's a tough place to play, no doubt, but they were able to do it twice last year. Sometimes you don't overthink things. They have completely dominated Utah the first 2 games, offensively, defensively, in every category you want to look at. Utah has had no answers, and the only answer they have is a prayer that they're coming home. Well, they didn't beat these guys last year at home. They're not going to beat them this year at home. Don't overthink it. The Rockets are the best team in the West. They're going to get a chance to prove it next series against Golden State. And why overthink this? The Rockets are going to go down there and win. The only way they don't win, same as I said against Philadelphia, is if they play a C game, and that's not what this team is about at all right now. This is a team on the upswing as they head into the Golden State series. So I think the Rockets are going to sweep Utah.
All right, Bobby. Anything else?
That's a lot of information, Mike, and nothing else. We'll have I'm going to wait and see that line on Fonini versus Lajovic, because Lajovic also upset his semifinal over Medvedev. So I'm going to see what that line is. I'm sure Fonini will be favored. We might, if it's enough, we might be on Lajovic tomorrow as an underdog. I'll have to see what the line is. There's been a trend where the players that have had big upsets have lost the next match. And that makes sense sometimes. It's such a short turnaround off of their career high win. you can get some value betting against them, and that's 2-0 already this tournament. So we might be on Lehovic tomorrow. We're going to have to see that line. We're going to have to get, decent number to do that because Fonini, he's a master on the clay too.
All right, Bobby. Do you want to talk any NHL?
Mike, I did not look at the games for tonight. I would love to if you have a take.
I have a take that I would probably just put the three favorites together in this one because I think Carolina and Winnipeg, both on the road, both have injury issues. If I was going to throw one in here, value, it would be Dallas because I think Dallas is eventually going to win this series against Nashville either way.
Okay.
But, the Jets and Blues are interesting because they're playing at St. Louis, but I think the home team has lost every game in that series.
Oh, wow. Okay. I was not aware of that.
It's kind of the opposite of the 1991 World Series, Bobby. But, yeah, the Hurricanes the Hurricanes have had to call like three guys up, or the 1987 World Series, basically any World Series the Minnesota Twins were in. But the Hurricanes actually have had to call.
At home.
Yeah. Actually, the Hurricanes have had to call two or three guys up that weren't even in the NHL at the end of this season just to have a full roster tonight. Injuries are hurting them there. So I would lean towards the Caps with the Blues and Winnipeg. Winnipeg's got an injury that's fairly severe that they're going to be missing one of their best players. I think St. Louis ends that tonight. Dallas and Nashville is the only one I question, but I tend to lean towards Nashville tonight.
Okay, Mike, I got a suggestion. And the Dallas game is the first one that starts at 12:08 Pacific, 3:08 Eastern. So if the listeners want to get on your bandwagon and kind of
parlay that, and if they lose, parlay the other two.
Exactly. Play Dallas straight for a little bit to cover everything. Like let's just say put 50 on that or 30 or whatever your amounts are, and then play your three-team parlay. Right. So you hit Dallas, you got money in the bank, you've got your three-teamer going. If the two favorites come in, you have a nice win. If Dallas loses, you can cover with the two-teamer. Got to bet a little heavier, though. Maybe put 50 or 60 on that two-teamer if Dallas loses. So I think that's a way your listeners can play that. Those other two games are at 4:05 and 5:05, and that will give you time because the Stars are at 12:08. So I think that would be a good formula. In fact, I'll do that, Mike. I'm going to do that myself just to give you some good karma there.
All righty. Let's see. What do we got for on this day? No commercial break today because this is Saturday. Just go to MyBookie.Ag, click on the banner at the top of the page, and you get a $1,000 cash bonus up to 50% of your first deposit. What do you got, Bobby?
Mike, hey, I love that, and you do a great job promoting them. They could have no bones there, and we tell them Monday through Friday. We call Saturday, which is we're doing it every Saturday. We have been at least. We call it a Saturday special because it is. To me, I love getting up on a Saturday and giving the listeners an extra show and us an extra chance to talk. I really enjoy it, and so although it's not a given, we want to be here on Saturday for you. And here is the on this day. For today, 1986, Michael Jordan, this was the day that he set an NBA playoff record. He had 63 points in a game on this day in 1986.
And he lost. And the reason he lost is, number one, the rest of his team wasn't very good. But also, they were playing the Boston Celtics, which were maybe the greatest team in NBA history. I think it's either them or the LA Lakers of the next year. I think those were the two best teams I've ever seen. The thing that's interesting here is Michael Jordan broke his foot early in that season, if you remember, and he missed like 64 games. And he came back towards the end of the season. A lot of people thought they should have just held him out. But he comes back. He plays pretty well right at the end of the season. And they made the playoffs with a record of 30-52 that year, if I remember right.
Oh, wow.
And I think that, there was two other teams, Washington, and I don't remember who the other one was, but there was, two other teams. I think it was Washington and New Jersey was the other one. Washington and New Jersey also had losing records. So seeds 6, 7, and 8 all had losing records. The top 5 teams were the only ones that have winning records. And they go into this series, and really, even though they lost, I think this is where the phenomenon of Michael Jordan really started to take effect. Game 1, they lose 123-104, but Jordan scores 49 points. Game 2, they come out, and Michael Jordan is unconscious. He scores 63 points, and they lose. I think it was in double overtime, wasn't it? Does it say on there?
No, it doesn't say on there. No, it doesn't.
I'm pretty sure it was double overtime, but Jordan scored. And this is how bad this team was. The starting lineup for this team, if I remember right, was like Orlando Woolridge, who wasn't a bad player, Michael Jordan, Dave Corzine, Charles Oakley, who wasn't a bad player, but he wasn't what he would become a few years later, and Kyle Macy. And right there, that's a rough team. And if you look, though, John Paxson came off the bench and played a lot in that game. He had a lot to do with those first 3 championships for the Chicago Bulls. And Gene Banks, who played on that 78 Duke team, was on the bench. And the interesting was George Gervin was on this team. And George Gervin when Jordan went out, George Gervin averaged 16 points a game the rest of that year. I do not remember why, but I don't think he played more than 5 or 10 minutes in any of the playoff games. But when you look at this, the problem was, when you look at the box score, Jordan scored 63, Woolridge scored 24. Nobody else on the Bulls scored more than 10 points. And when you go to the Celtics starting 5 players, Bird 36, McHale 27, Ainge 24, Dennis Johnson 15, Robert Parrish 13, and then you go to the 6th man, who that year was the 6th man of the year. Bill Walton scored 10. Jerry Sheesting, who when he was a Pacer made a couple NBA All-Star games, scored 8. And if you look at him even farther down, the 8th man was Scott Wedman, who, when we talked a few weeks ago about the 1981 playoffs and how the Rockets had a below 500 record and made it to the finals, they actually, in the conference finals in 1981, beat the Kings, and I think Wedman was one of the best players on that team. So that was a team where literally you probably could have taken Walton, Sheesting, Wedman, Carline, and Ainge and probably beaten the Bulls.
Wow.
Maybe not that day, though, because Michael Jordan was a bad dude that day.
not that day. Yes.
But they would have won a few games and probably won the series because, come on, Dave Corzine, Kyle Macy. That's 2 white guys right there. What the hell? White guys, unless they're on the Celtics, usually aren't that good.
Or the Jazz.
Yeah, the Jazz.
Sometimes the Pacers, too. But, no, you know what? Seriously, though, what it shows is you have the Celtics, who were one of the all-time best teams. They're not going to let any single player ever win a game. I mean, he can have 63 if he wants, but they're not going to win that game. And that's a rough draw for them, having to deal with Jordan for 4 games, or back then it might have been a 5-game series.
It was best of 5, so they won the first 2 games. Yeah. And the thing that stood out to me was after the second game, people actually were giving the Bulls a shot going back to Chicago Stadium. They get back to Chicago Stadium, and Dennis Johnson held him to like 20 or 23 points for the entire game, and the Celtics blew him out by 20 because the only way they were staying in a game is if Jordan scored in the 60s against them.
Yeah, right. And, as we know, 5 years later, Jordan had a little bit better teammates and got his first one on the way to
that
6.
And the Celtics no longer existed like they did then. That helped a lot, too.
And the bad boys were blown up finally. And
yeah, the bad boys got to be old boys.
Oh, Mike, that's great. A little update here. The Diamondbacks hit 2 home runs in the first inning off Yu Darvish, and they got an early 2-0 lead. So that's a good start for our listeners and for the fans there.
Yeah, actually, Jordan was held to 19 points in Game 3. I just looked it up. 8 for 18 shooting, 2 for 3 from the line. So, yeah. And Dennis Johnson was a guy that people don't remember, but he was one of the best clutch players you'll ever find, and he was a great defender.
Oh, yeah. He was a great defensive player, clutch player. In fact, I read something one time where it was either Bird or McHale. I can't remember. It was one of them talking. I think it was Bird. Was it the greatest player he ever played with? Was Dennis Johnson. That's true. I heard that. I heard him say that.
I didn't say it wasn't. And Dennis Johnson had a lot to do with those back-to-back NBA Finals team for the Supersonics in 78 and 79. Because I think he averaged like 14 points a game, something like that for those teams, because that team had downtown Freddie Brown, Jack Sickman, all those guys on it too.
Yeah, and another thought that comes to my mind regarding him is that, he kind of passed away young in life. I think maybe only 50 years old or something, Mike?
Yeah, I think it wasn't that long ago, was it? It may be just because I'm getting older, and sometimes things don't seem that long ago, and they were, but I don't think it was that long ago.
No, I don't think so either. He's from USC, and there's quite a few articles when he passed away in this area in Southern California, and that was a tough loss. And I forgot what he had. He had some sort of ailment or disease that he picked up, but yeah, he was a great player, and that was an unbelievable team. And some of the guys like Danny Ainge is the GM. We know Bill Walton has been very successful with his broadcasting career, and his son Luke, and Larry Bird. Of course, we all know what he's up to, and Robert Parrish is probably smoking some pot on an island somewhere.
Dennis Johnson died of a heart attack, and he actually was a coach for the Austin Toros, whatever that is. And he collapsed at the end of one of their practices after being rushed to a nearby hospital. He could not be revived and was later pronounced dead. He was survived by his wife and children. And, yeah. That's what Bill Laimbeer called him one of the greatest players he ever played against.
Wow. Does it say the year that Dennis Johnson did pass?
2007.
Okay, so it was a little longer than we thought, but it's like you said, it all blends in. It seems like yesterday that happened. Yeah, well, that's tough. I thought I was going to say something about. Oh, you mentioned that he died at practice. Does any other former player come to mind? Former great player that died at sport? Pete Maravich. That's
well,
right.
That wasn't a practice. He was playing wasn't it a church or a YMCA at lunch? And basically had an enlarged heart, and they didn't know about it.
Oh no, I didn't know the exact.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what it was. But he went on his lunch, and they were playing basketball at a local YMCA, and he had an enlarged heart, which means he'd always had one, and it finally just gave out on him.
Wow.
But Dennis Johnson, the thing I remember most about Dennis Johnson was the 1985 NBA Finals. And if you remember in '85, that was the one where Game 1, like the Saints something massacre or something, where they came out and they beat the Lakers 148-114. The Lakers came back in Game 2 behind Kareem, who scored like 38 points with a migraine, and they upset Boston at the Garden. Game 3, I'm pretty sure that they blew the Celtics out. And then in Game 4, the Celtics trailed most of that game. They got back in it late, and Dennis Johnson hit a shot from like 20 feet out on a wing at the buzzer to win the game and to tie the series. And I remember thinking, well, now Boston's got home court advantage back, and they're going to win the series. But it didn't happen as the Lakers ran them out of the building in Game 5 and then blew them out in Game 6 at Boston. But the thing I remember about Dennis Johnson was that shot in Game 4 at the Forum, basically right in Jack Nicholson and Dancing Barry's face.
Yeah, Dancing Barry. And
whatever happened to Dancing Barry? Is he still alive?
He's alive, and I read an article on him maybe 3 or 4 years ago online, and I can't remember even what the article said. He's alive. He's doing things, but, he's no longer at the Forum or Staples Center, whatever you want to call it. But
is he no longer dancing anymore?
I don't think so. I don't think so.
He's just buried now, huh?
Yeah, I think what happens is they get those guys and they kind of make themselves celebrities, and then the team will give them tickets and $50 a game if they want to come. And after a while, it just gets old. I mean, you know what I mean? How long can your run last? They're not getting paid a lot of money. And I think there was a little bit of resentment he had that he became such a, like a cult following there in the mid 80s and late 80s. And the Lakers, I don't think really took care of him financially. It's not really their responsibility to.
Well, this is the thing. Dancing Barry performed again in the 1986 finals between the Rockets and Celtics, and he was accosted by a fan who called him a traitor. And Barry's last appearance for the Lakers was in a 15-point victory against the Chicago Bulls in January 1990. The games grew less fun for Barry, and he simply stopped going. Barry was left with such a bitter taste in his mouth that the Lakers never said goodbye to him or thanked him for the integral part he played in their 7 seasons of great memories for fans. I added integral too on my own. And that in 2007, he refused an invitation to attend a 20-year reunion of the Lakers' 1987 championship when the Lakers denied his request for $2,000 and a plane ticket, even though he would have had to fly across the country.
Yeah, well, that's crazy. The Lakers could have opened up a little bit and helped the guy out, but
yeah, what the hell? They could fly him out there because, when we think of the Lakers, I mean, outside of the team, you think of Paulo Abdul and Dancing Barry.
That's right. And you think of Jerry Buss, and now Jeannie Buss, and the only difference is now is they're not winning. And, we'll see what happens with that whole thing. But I read an article this morning about Kevin Durant. Maybe not a slam dunk going to the Knicks. The Clippers will maybe get a little piece of Kevin Durant. Who knows?
That would be great. That would shove it in the Lakers' face. It would be hilarious. And remember, I believe I predicted this stuff at the start of the NBA season.
That one, that exact one, or the, oh no,
I don't remember. We'll have to go back and listen. But I said, don't be surprised if the Clippers get the big players and the Lakers don't, because
right.
LeBron's an ass.
Yep. I remember you saying that, Mike, and now Magic's bowed out, and
they got Jerry West there. Jerry West can make things happen.
Yeah, that's right. He can with Lawrence Frank, and who was an Indiana ball boy, right? Steve mentioned that to us.
Yeah, Steve knows all about Indiana ball boys, but I won't go any further than that. And Steve, if you're listening, you got to admit that was funny right there. Touche. All right. Let's see. Also, by the way, Dancing Barry at one point was called Magic Barry, too. And he was called Magic Barry because for 5 years he danced at Charlotte Hornets games. Now, I don't know why he wouldn't be Hornet Barry, because it looked like if his name was Magic Barry, he'd have been in, Orlando. But when the team moved to New Orleans, then he was out of a dancing gig. So maybe we need to find Dancing Barry and have him on the show, because I bet he's really pissed off at life in general. What do you think?
Yeah, he probably is, and he'd probably have a few good stories. We'll get him on the Legends.
Yeah.
Is he
just think, maybe we could get the confirmation that Paul Abdul slept with Dancing Barry, and they had a dancing kid that could sing.
Yeah. Mike, that would be good. And I want to mention to you're a very humble guy, and I really respect you about that. Respect you for that. But you and Jeremiah had a great show last night. Any of the listeners are listening now. If they didn't get a chance to listen, go back on the podcast. And I listened to this tape as well. When I finished all my stuff, I listened to it on tape last night, but it was on live. Mike's Friday night Inside Live Boxing. Him and Jeremiah got into the talking about the steroids, which is in all sports. We know that, and they were specific about boxing. But then they got a little deeper, and I really liked where you guys went with that. And it was one of the best shows I've heard that you guys ever do, and especially on that topic. And I loved how Tiger Woods and Peyton Manning, they weren't off limits for you last night, and I respected that. And it was a great show for those that didn't hear it.
Yeah, I just think that, everybody needs to be held accountable, or just let everybody do it. Because right now, people like Tiger Woods and Peyton Manning get away with it. Everybody acts like they would never do that because they're such great people. But just go look at a picture of Tiger Woods in 2003 as opposed to when he started wearing these little tight golf shirts in 2007 or 8. And then I do think that there's something to be said for gaining 20 pounds of muscle when you're like in your early 30s, and then all of a sudden your back goes out. So I think the two could have something to do with each other.
They could, and we talked about Rafael Nadal this morning. I mean, when we started the show out, that guy looks anything but a tennis player, with his shirt off. Hey, you know what? This is today's era, and I'm not saying I'm for or against it, but what I liked about it is you guys went into the possible medical effects of it, and you've done some research and looked at how there's these guys can take this stuff now and not have the, necessarily the medical effects, because the doctors now know what other things to take with it. So that
because basically steroids will kill your liver, but there's stuff now you can take for the liver, which protect the liver, and you can take it safely. And people know now that you do a cycle, then you cycle off for a while, then you cycle back on. But the thing is this, and Jeremiah brought it up last night, once somebody's used PEDs, most of these PEDs have an effect on you for the rest of your life. So just telling somebody don't do that again, suspending them for 4 games and then letting them come back, they still have an advantage over people that didn't use them.
Right. It's always going to be there. But anyhow, I didn't want to get off on that, but I just kind of wanted to plug your show. Not that it needs plugging, it does great anyways, but I mean, there might be some listeners that are only listen to this show that would love to, I would love for them to hear that show, and because I enjoyed it so much last night, and I don't always listen to all the boxing ones, but last night's I did, and that was great.
Yeah, so if you want to hear the truth about people like Peyton Manning and Tiger Woods and Usain Bolt and somebody in almost every sport, it's there. You can go to GorillaTruth.com, click on the podcast, Inside Boxing Daily from last night. You'll see the picture of the needles and everything for the PED show, which I can tell you this, that title to that show was something completely different until we started talking about it, but you know how I can be sometimes.
Oh, yeah. and Mike, I still didn't hear the George Foreman Legends interview, and that's going to be on the agenda for either later tonight or tomorrow when I get a chance to unwind and put some podcasts on and listen while I'm doing some work. And that's a big one I'm looking forward to. You spoke with George Foreman 1.5 years ago, and that one I want to hear. And so that, I know you posted that. I'm going to go back and do that one. And that's,
Yeah, so to tell you a little bit about us, if you're listening through other means, which there are other means, Spotify, all of them, but thegruellytruth.com, you can go there. You can find interviews with Daniel Carcillo, who was an NHL player who was suing the NHL over CTE, Robert Brazil, Jerry Kramer, guys that we've all had on that are NFL Hall of Famers. If you go CFL-wise, you got Robert Drummond, who does a weekly show with us. Dieter Brock has been on that weekly show, plus there's a Legends show with him. Baseball-wise, you can find legends like Tommy John, Kelly Gruber. We've got a bunch of those guys there, too. So make sure you go check out the podcast on thegruelingtruth.com. Or if you're in something like Spotify or Spreaker or iTunes, iHeartRadio, whatever, just go through, scroll, and you will find hundreds of guys that have great stories, from the Larry Holmes to the George Foremans, Kenny Anderson, Reggie Williams, the old Cincinnati Bengal, Hal Mummy, who was the guy that started the air raid offense, which is what we're seeing more and more in the NFL today. So that's what we pride ourselves on, is being able to get guys that most podcasts can't get, and that's what we do, because most of these guys want to be paid, but they'll come talk to us, and it usually never costs us anything. And we have had 2 athletes in the past ask for money, and yeah, I think they were brain damaged anyways. They literally were. It was like Riddick Bowe. Riddick Bowe wanted like $5,000.
Yeah.
And I'm crazy. Like, Riddick, I just interviewed George Foreman like 2 weeks ago, and he didn't ask for any money. Who the hell are you compared to George Foreman?
But George doesn't need any money.
Yeah, George ain't broke, so it's no big deal to George. But, all right, Bobby, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. I want to remind everybody you can now find us on Zeno Live Radio also. There is an app at the iTunes Store through Zeno. We also have another app through Spreaker on the iTunes Store, so there's no excuse. If you want to hear us, you can always hear us. You can follow Bobby at Sheridan Report on Twitter, or the SheridanReport.com on the internet, where you can pay for his daily Sheridan Report, $10 a day or $50 a month. Also, we got the handicapping guide, which you can go check out, especially if you're into horse racing. Highly recommend that also. What was his Twitter handle again, Bobby?
At the handicap guider, something like that.
Yeah,
you can.
Weird.
Yeah, his name is Phil Rankin, Rankin, and you can find everything at thehandicappingguide.com.
Yeah, and about a month from now, when it's Kentucky Derby time, if you want to know everything you can about the Kentucky Derby, Phil will be on with Bobby and myself. We may have a special treat with a jockey who's maybe won a Kentucky Derby or two. That'll be in that usually at the end of May, the Kentucky Derby.
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah.
At the end of right.
Keep an eye out there. We'll have Phil on. We'll have a special guest. Me, Bobby, will shoot the crap about the Kentucky Derby, and maybe we can help everybody make a little bit of money there also. All right, guys. MyBookie.Ag, the Sheridan Report, the handicapping guide or handicappers guide?
Handicapping, ING.
Handicapping guide. And you can find, if you want to go there, you can go on to GurleyTruth.com, scroll down about halfway down on the right on the page, and you'll find actually the link that'll take you right there. So I highly recommend them and the Sheridan Report. Tomorrow night, me, Jeremiah, and John will be back with Inside Boxing Weekly to talk about the pay-per-view fight tonight and the other fights that are on. And then Monday on thegruelingtruth.com, Survive in Advance show. You can hear this live at thegruelingtruth.com or on Spreaker through our site. At noon on Monday, we've got a special guest. We got Gary Burley, who played for over a decade in the NFL. He played for the Cincinnati Bengals and the Atlanta Falcons. And this interview is going to be twofold. Gary was on our show. He did a Legend show with me a couple years ago, and me and Gary became friends. And Gary ended up needing a kidney. And he got that kidney, I think, just like 4 or 5 months ago. So he's going to come on and talk to us a little bit about the process of finding out how he found out, what the process was to get the new kidney. And then also he was on the Cincinnati Bengals in 1980 when Forrest Gregg became the head coach and turned that team into a Super Bowl team in like 1 or 2 years' time. So he will be on to talk about the kidneys, and he will be on to talk about the legacy of Forrest Gregg. And this is a guy who was really close with Forrest Gregg. So we're going to have him on, talk about Forrest Gregg, talk about his kidney procedure he had. Should be a great show. Gary is one of the nicest guys you're ever going to meet. So make sure you check us out at noon Eastern time on Monday on thegruelingtruth.com. And you will also see a link shared when the interview starts at Grueling Truth on the Twitter page. All right, guys, we're going to wrap it up. I want to remind you, you can hear us on now over 200 different formats, including iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, Zeno Radio. You name it, we're there. So for Bobby Sheridan, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.